With Chainsaw Man chapter 170, it once again is a very painful reminder that if there's a character that you're starting to fall in love with, it's probably better to not get attached to them because their days are probably numbered, and this chapter itself sends a very strong message that Denji is being pushed to his breaking point and he's having his humanity stripped away from him, one very painful layer at a time, and this might be the most painful layer since the deaths of Aki and Power, and it's all intentional in order to awaken the true power of Chainsaw Man. And with this death in particular, it's just like the Aki and Power deaths, where those were relationships that when you look at the foundation for how they started out with a cracked foundation. You cannot build a house on a cracked foundation because it will eventually fall. Power was deceiving Denji right from the very beginning. Aki and Denji, they had bad blood right from the very get-go. Makima was deceiving Denji, so was Reze. And now when we get to the death of Nayuta in this chapter, it is continuing it because she too started out as someone who was using Denji. With all the other characters who were aforementioned, outside of Makima, all of them grew to care for Denji. Because their relationship was built on a cracked foundation, it eventually crumbled with their deaths. This is very much in line with what Fujimoto's done in the past. So we open up the chapter continuing where the last one left off. Barem is offering Denji food with a smile on his face, and he's telling him to eat up while he can, all while giving him the proper way to eat sushi, which is to start off light with toppings before you work your way up to the main dish. Denji, being the crass guy that he is, he pretty much tells Barem to shove the sushi where the sun doesn't shine, but Denji eventually complies with Barem's orders after a rather cruel act is pulled on Denji. The first of a few acts, mind you. Barem has effectively discovered Denji's thumbscrew, which is Nayuta, and he tells Denji that if he doesn't do what he's saying, Denji will lose his chance to see Nayuta ever again, which is straight out the playbook of something that Makima would have done, where she would exert her control over Denji, but obviously Barem is no Makima. Whereas she would smile in his face and make sexually charged actions towards him, Barem is more to the point. Either you do what I say or you never see Nayuta again. It was Fujimoto taking the time to emphasize to us as the audience how much Denji takes the role of Nayuta's guardian very seriously, all to butter us up for the end of the chapter. He's willing to dehumanize himself and eat on command like a dog in order to make sure he sees Nayuta again, but the devil is, no pun intended here, in the details, but we'll get to what I mean by that later on. This leads to Barem again correcting Denji, saying, slow down a second, savor the taste of the food that you're eating at this point. And Denji, he's finally had enough and he slaps a plate out of Barem's hand, and we see Mitaka take immediate notice of what's going on and the sudden change in Denji's behavior. While Denji hasn't exactly been the most subtle guy in the series, anyone who's seen the damage he's left behind during his battles as Chainsaw Man, they can definitely attest to it. The guy is and will always be really crass and to the point when you get on his nerves, which is what Barem's doing intentionally. Denji tells him, stop all the games. I'll go kill all the people of public safety and then you can take me to see Nayuta, which leads to Barem telling him, hey, relax. And we learn the true reason that Barem wants Denji to transform into Chainsaw Man, and it's because he knows the true power of Chainsaw Man, and it's a power that Denji didn't know existed if we take him at his words, which is the power to erase devil names. Now, I can't remember if Denji was ever told about this in Chainsaw Man Part 1, but we as the audience, we've known this information for a while. Makima revealed it when she talked about the names of devils that history no longer recalls, but she can faintly remember their names, and Yoru in Chapter 1 of Part 2 is rattling off the names of devils that she wants to have brought back by defeating Chainsaw Man. But those two knowing about Chainsaw Man's true power, that makes sense. They are two of the four horsewomen of the devils, but Barem knowing this is a bit interesting. It makes you wonder who he truly is, and it's a great move to add another layer of mystery to the character that Fujimoto has slowly begun to make you start hating even more than you do. This leads to Denji pushing back, saying Chainsaw Man doesn't have any powers like that, but Barem just feeds the guy more food and he doubles down. He's telling the truth. Barem then breaks it down for Denji how he can truly become Chainsaw Man, and it's here that Fujimoto begins building towards that cruel and heartbreaking and controversial plot twist at the end of the chapter. He tells Denji that in order to truly become Chainsaw Man, everyone must possess extreme fear of him, and Denji himself must be unhappy, which there within lies a problem. Chainsaw Man is super popular, and the life that Denji's been living, it makes it really hard for him to be unhappy, truly unhappy. We now see why Barem went out of his way to torch Denji's home and kill all of his pets. It was to begin driving him into despair to bring out Chainsaw Man's true powers, and Barem then takes it a step further by telling Denji, hey, you're gonna eat some deluxe super fat tuna, and and that's where the alarm bell should be going off. He calls it a fat tuna, but tuna in itself is supposed to be a lean meat, high in protein, low in fat, and low in calories. But this tuna in particular is special enough, it's called a deluxe tuna. Further signs that something is wrong here is that the chef is being ordered to send down the food on a plate, and he is sweating like crazy, and without knowing the context might go, hey, what's the big deal? And at first I was there with you. Back when my mom used to have a wedding and catering business, I've been in the kitchen more than a few times, and it gets hot in there very quickly, so sweating in a hot kitchen shouldn't be a shock. But the way that the guy's face is drawn is a huge red flag of the cruel reveal that we have coming, because Fujimoto lays out the whole build up to that scene super thick by having everyone at the bar freaking out the sight of what it is that they're seeing, and even Mitaka finds herself confused and shocked by what it is that she's seeing, which is what appears to be Nayuta's head on a literal platter. And my god, the way that Barem is staring at Denji here, smiling, it's enough to make this man jump to the top of my list of the most hated Chainsaw Man characters. He's watching Denji try and hold it together, and he's waiting to see how he reacts to the sight of Nayuta's head on the table. And the way that Fujimoto has her eyes in focus on the last page, wide open with fear, it's just heartbreaking, and it's enough to make you fill in the blanks yourself of what happened to her before her head was cut off. Now, this becomes even more cruel when you get past the shock of seeing a child dead and her head on a plate of what is essentially being served to the parent who raised her, but it becomes even more heartbreaking because Nayuta was one of the literal last things that Denji had from his life that was still keeping him anchored. This whole time, he's searching for Nayuta. He's searching for the one person that was keeping his sanity. He lost his friends in part 1 who became family. He lost his love when Reze was taken down by Makima. He lost a allure of what Makima represented to him. He lost Miaoi, his connection to power. He lost his dogs in the fire, and he lost his literal home. However, to lose Nayuta like this, it is soul crushing for him. It is ironic, and it is clearly meant to drive him into despair. This makes you go back to Barem's words and pay very close attention to what he's saying, which is, he said, I'll let you see Nayuta again. In the last chapter, he never said, I'll let you see her alive. He chose his words very carefully then, and he chooses them very carefully in this chapter. This makes you also look at the food that he was serving Denji, like that extra special tuna, the deluxe tuna, and realize what he was really serving him. It was Nayuta's body. Again, tuna is a lean meat. It is a low-fat protein, yet he calls it a, quote, deluxe fatty tuna. He was eating Nayuta, just like he ended up eating Makima at the end of Chainsaw Man Part 1. This hits home even harder when you go back to Chainsaw Man Chapter 119. So you guys have heard me use the phrase Chekhov's gun in the past numerous times, where I say if something is introduced into a story like a gun on a table, it needs to be fired off, it needs to be used in some kind of way narratively in some capacity. It can't just be there. Well, in Chapter 119, the plants on the bookshelf that belonged to Denji and Nayuta, they were foreshadowing, and as we said here on the channel for the last year and a half, Nayuta was a giant Chekhov's gun waiting to go off. Well, it's the first chapter that we see Nayuta directly in Chainsaw Man Part 2, where we see her in all of her glory, and it was foreshadowing for her fate. That Chekhov's gun, it is now about to go off. Denji's plant, it is full of life when you look at it. It's reaching up towards the sunlight that was behind the curtains, but Nayuta's plant was in the process of dying. The leaves, they are wither, and it's at a point where it might be beyond saving, where it can't be nursed back to health. Nayuta at that point was still being positioned as a project, someone who could either turn out to be another Makima, or she could turn out to be a better version of Makima, an antithesis of Makima, who was brought up and sent down the right path because she was raised with love and she wasn't treated as a tool like Makima. Yeah, the reason why this works as well as it does, and it's something that I think a lot of people overlook. So Nayuta's writing, it was a symbolism of nature versus nurture, and which would win out with her character. Could Denji make her into a better version of Makima, or was she given to her nature as a devil, as one of the horsewomen? The series has shown us repeatedly, some dreams, some goals, they don't get reached. It is realism, the dark realism of life in a very fantastical setting. I think it was a situation here that you get with a lot of literature deaths that use children. She died before the book on Nayuta could be fully written. That's why kids' deaths in stories, they are so effective. She is a young light that never got to shine shine as brightly as she could. She could have gone either way, but she was never given the option. It is the cruelty of life. And it is continuing the theme of what we've seen about relationships that are built on bad foundations. Even if you do grow to care for Denji, like Aki and Power, Reze and Nayuta, and eventually Mitaka did, those relationships will ultimately fail. And in the case of failing, it ends in death in this world of Chainsaw Man. This is not going to be a cookie cutter ending. The story has made that much clear from the very beginning. And I see a lot of people struggling to digest this, saying it's suffering for the sake of suffering, when that is the furthest thing from the truth. There's a lot of symbolism here with Nayuta's death. That plant is just one of several examples I can give you of foreshadowing that's done as symbolism. And right now with her death, it is very poetic because one of the things we see as far as a flashback as one of her early memories of Denji is when she's reading his mind and she's saying she's going to fill his heart up with joy and etc. Then she's going to utterly crush him. The same thing that Makima did, even though she grew to care for Denji as we see in part 2 of Chainsaw Man, she ultimately meets the same fate as Denji, being ate by Denji. Denji right now is on his path to losing the last bits of his humanity, and in the chapter right before this, he's already telling Pochita how much he disliked everything that happened to him during the course of the last few days. This is everything I love about Chainsaw Man. The way that the small details are brought back, like how we see now as plot points that are used for symbolism purposes, or Fujimoto finds a way to do both in order to hit you in the heart, rip it out, and then stomp on it, and then place a band-aid over the wound and tell you to suck it up. Nayuta is being positioned as a Chekhov's gun, and that Chekhov's gun, it is loaded and it is in Denji's hands, depending on how he chooses to act after this reveal. All that time that we saw of Denji caring for Nayuta, where he's brushing his teeth with her, doing these strange things for money to save for her schooling in the future, sleeping with her and the dogs. It is an effective way of writing that adds to the heartbreaking twist of what was an already ballsy move to kill off a child. It is the continued dehumanization of Denji, because he's Chainsaw Man. He is a tool. He has no need for a child like Nayuta. He has no need for pets. He has no need for friends. He has no need for a home. And Barem has taken all this away to make him unhappy in order to pull out his true power. This, of course, leads us to Denji's reaction to the turn of events, which we're going to get in the next chapter. But in the meantime, click here to watch more videos from my Chainsaw Man Explained playlist, or click here for more videos from the Anime Explained channel.